back in 1983, I did my, I think it was probably a maths exam in the morning, and with a couple of mates, we got our bikes. We lived in Keln, North Wiltshire town, and we bungeed my sleeping bag and my tent on the back. So I heard there was a little event going on across on Salisbury Plain. So we pedalled 25 miles, cycled past Fargo Plantation just by Stonehenge Festival. Got round the corner and we could see flags, tents, vendors, buses, naked people, political stuff, menus with drugs, just all sorts of absolutely, and there was 30,000 of them as well. So what the hell was going on? What the hell was going on? Hopefully Dean can tell us.
Alright, I'm Dean, better known as Wally Dean for the last 4 years since I've started looking after this spot. Probably amongst you, there are people who already know their Wallies, and hopefully there'll be a few of you that leave here thinking you're Wallies. I think you're a load of Wallies, so we're all pretty good there. Click on one, mate. I've over the last few years been working with Alan Dealing, and we've compiled a book of various travelling stories, recollections, all packaged up together. Probably about 80 writers helped with this, and I helped do the Wally Hope part of this book, and also Alan Dealing wrote a fair bit of it as well. So obviously, if anyone wants a copy of this book, they can come and see me, but I've also got these leaflets around the room so that people can get in touch with Alan's company directly. He also does this lovely Beanfield one as well, which I well recommend if you're interested in travellers' woes that day. I don't know why they call it a big battle, it was more beating really. So anyway, this is a photo by, painting by David Stoop of the festival in '84, and sadly ended up being the last year of the festival. Go on. Here's Wally looking all nice and young. This is about 1967. He's just got out of prison and he's gone to stay with the Hatfields in Ongar. He basically, he'd had a fairly well-to-do childhood. His dad had a good job, so the family had plenty of money, quite a lot of property, etc. But when he was 12, his dad died. And John Snage, who became his guardian after a while, describes how he saw the boy change in front of him from someone who was quite outgoing to someone who was quite withdrawn again. Yeah, I mean, looking full of the joys of life there, really. So, a bit of blind work going on. Yeah, always coming out a bit more now.
Better for the screen.
Lovely one. Oh, and you will get used to seeing the little suns drawn all over the place. He was a total sun worshipper, so anywhere that he was, he wanted the sun. So there wasn't enough sun. The easiest way is to draw one on. So everyone's a Wally, and every day is a Sunday. So we can go on now. Right, in 1968, he's just got out of prison for drugs charges. He's been sent to his guardian, and he heads off on the Aldermaston March, probably his first political action. There was a big march that went all the way from a nuclear place, Berkshire, I think, or Oxfordshire, one of the two. And they marched down from London. I think I might have to adjust the speed of that in a minute. Technology. How's the media? Not playing. I should do it very nice.
Put it on like super fast, like.
No, just leave it on media, but just make sure the play's not. Sorry, sir. All right. Oh, really nice. So anyway, he's gone off on the Aldermaston March, and the first time really that he's seen proper protests and people using their power through numbers. A bit later on, he ends up at the anti-Vietnam demonstration in Grosvenor Square, which is a pretty different story of people using their power. The whole day kicked off. It was an anti-Vietnam War demonstration, and it kicked off pretty nasty. But there again, Wally was out seeing people using people power to change things, or hope to change things. There was definitely a hope around at the time. He was also, I mean, he wasn't just throwing bricks at the policeman or anything. He was getting quite into the jazz scene, going out in London. He quite often frequented the Eel Pie community down near Twickenham, where he met the Pretty Things, who became housemates for a while. they took him along to happenings, and he loved the happenings at the Roundhouse. It's a particular place. The people at the Roundhouse have recently got in touch with me to talk about when he got into LSD, which totally changed London for him. I mean, suddenly from a very grey world, he was seeing everything psychedelically. London would never be the same for Wally, and he started to regard acid as a sacrament, as a way of getting in touch with the divine, maybe finding something that he'd been missing since his father had gone. So he carried on getting involved with alternative culture, which eventually led him off to the Isle of Wight, which some people say is where he picked up the Wally name. Unfortunately, a lot of people were shut out of the Isle of Wight. There was a lot of clamour for a free festival, and the organisers were saying, well, definitely not. But over a amount of time, I don't know whether you can see these very clearly. No. Oh, it's a big fence with Stalag, thinking Glastonbury, but with Stalag 17 written along it. Eventually, anyway, the fence came down, the bands played on, and a great festival was had by many. And I think even the people who paid were okay. Now, this has changed Wally, as you can see from his early pictures. He's taken on a lot more colour, and he's off to Glastonbury. Now, Glastonbury for him is a major changing point. It's a point he describes as shamanic in his life, when he really got in touch with living with the land. And he soon heads off with people he's met at Glastonbury, and he goes off to Windsor in '72. Here he is, you can't see it very well because of the lighting here. Here he is helping Ubi Dwyer, who organised the Windsor festivals. Ubi was a well-known anarchist in a couple of countries. He'd been part of an anarchist group in New Zealand, moved on to Sydney where he started running acid clubs, and came back and decided that the right place for a festival was right in the Queen's Garden, land that he'd considered stolen. The state obviously didn't want to see quite his way and came down quite heavily. I mean, in some cases far too heavily, on people who had gathered there just to live together and have a good time. They even had undercover coppers. There's two of these fellas here. This is the Free Press at Windsor. Two of these people are undercover coppers. I don't know, you could get a lolly or something if you can guess which ones, but I doubt you will be able to with this light, unfortunately. This is Wally's enjoying a gig now. He's really, really turned on to the psychedelic music. He's tripping most days, and he's having the time of his life. This is a band playing out on one of the stages in 1973. Evening Mist, I think they were called, although I was never quite sure how to pronounce that. Now afterwards he goes back to Dial House, and Dial House is run by, it's run as an open door commune by Penny Rambo, and G. Vorcher was living there, and G. Vorcher was quite a great artist. Now he was enthusiastic to get his own festival going, and he wanted his festival to be at Stonehenge. So G made these posters up for him. This is 1974, it had a Turin shroud on it, because he always carried a picture of the Turin shroud around in his pocket after having met what he believed an 11-year-old reincarnated Jesus in Cyprus. And that came through quite strongly in a lot of his leaflets. These are the flyers for the 1974 gathering, the Stonehenge. And the idea was to come together, every day was Sunday, to stay for all Sundays at Stonehenge, under the banner of the Union Wally, which is pretty much like the Union Jack, but with a great big smiley face in the middle of it. He wrote to the local landowners, sort of saying he wanted to come, and then they just came. This is a picture of Zorch's sound equipment facing over the stones. The Zorch, unfortunately for our young Wally, were the only band that turned up for the first gig, even though it had backing from Radio Caroline. But apparently Zorch played two 6-hour sets, I think. This is the parachute they lived under, and they must have been in quite a mess considering the amount of acid that seems to have been going around. I don't think these people are on acid, but the police kept a low presence, didn't want really to cause any confrontation. The Wallies were out the way, and as you can see, well maybe you can see, I hope you can see, here's Wally giving his V's with a copper with him. It's quite a high-ranking copper, who I would have been told had just been given a nice cup of hash oil tea, maybe explaining the smile, definitely explaining his. But unfortunately the Department of the Environment wanted the Wallies off their land. And so they took them to the High Court in August of 1974 to take possession of the land. They were evicted. They said that they were going to stay there, that God had told them that they should stay there. Stonehenge was the only place they wanted to be, and that they would love anyone who came to turn them off. Some of the Wallies moved over to Windsor, which is a big festival, happened again in '74. and I handed out these sort of leaflets to try and get more people back to bolster the numbers, because I mean at the time there was about 40 odd people living at Stonehenge almost full time, obviously a few less when the festival was on. This is Wally again about to talk to the 1974 crowd about coming back to Stonehenge with them, which quite a lot of people did, because a couple of days later it turned into one of the bloodiest incidents that had happened on the festival scene. The police came in really early in the morning, tents were ripped down, people were kicked about, women, children. It didn't seem to matter to the police. People defended the stage, but there was overwhelming police numbers. They hadn't expected there to be so many hippies at the time, freaks, whatever they want to be called. There were 380 tents, therefore there should only be about 600 people. There were 4,000 when they came in, so it took them quite a while to get the stages down, but unfortunately they ripped the stages down and arrested many people. The last person swinging from this bit of scaffolding was a Wally, I'm glad. And another unfortunate Wally who's being taken off to answer a few questions. Now Wally carried on campaigning for the 1975 festival. He got the leaflets again out through G. Borcher's help from Dial House. And there again he was calling people up, a call to action, because every festival was a battle honour. Unfortunately he ended up in this place. Now this place is Winchester Prison. He got arrested at the squat in Amesbury, and during the search for military deserters they found 3 tabs of acid, and so he ended up here on remand. They told him to plead guilty, and they told him that if he pleaded guilty he'd be out. He pleaded guilty, he ended up in this place, which is the Old Manor, a psychiatric hospital in Salisbury. And while he was in there, the 1975 festival rolled on, with a greater number of people, a greater number of bands, but unfortunately no Wally. Penny Rambo came down to this festival and was trying to raise people to go and protest outside the hospital, but unfortunately got outed as an undercover police officer and left the site pretty quick. The site was totally wrapped up in barbed wire, and Wally was still locked away behind his own barbed wire in the Old Manor. I mean, the overdosing that he received in that place was horrific. If any of you have read the book, I mean, 70 milligram pills, he was given 2,000 milligrams. Anyway, eventually, 2 days after the festival, he got out and he came back to where he felt safe. He came back to Dial House. But he was a totally different man. He was bloated, he'd put on so much weight he was hardly recognisable. He had trouble eating, he'd become photosensitive. He couldn't just sit in the garden like he would have in the days of old and enjoy the sun. He wanted to go to Watchfield, which was later on in the year, August. The people at Dial House tried to talk him out of it and decided, tried to tell him he wasn't strong enough. But he wanted to reconnect with the tribe, some more than others. This is actually an undercover policewoman who, to gather information on acid, went undercover. Another place they had sussed out was the information tower. There was a phone line coming into this information tower from the newspapers. And undercover policemen were operating them most of the time and were therefore picking up a lot of intelligence. Intelligence which would later lead to some arrests. And this is after Wally. After Wally always managed to keep his nose somehow out of trouble. This is him cooking up communal dinner. And they were cooking up charges which later would become Operation Julie, the largest drugs operation in the land. But the vibe was overall good at the festival. It's a government-sanctioned festival, and so there was very little police presence. And Wally was hanging out with his tribe again, starting to feel safe. He told his friends that acid had done the trick and he was starting to feel stronger. And then, on almost the last day of the festival, he did an interview in a TP. I think it may be this TP, although I wouldn't stake everything on it. But he did an interview with Chris Waite. Now, he was going to come into £39,000 on his 30th birthday, which is only 2 years away. And he was talking about buying permanent festival lands near Stonehenge, a place where everyone could be free, and where the children of Albion could set up a new base. Unfortunately, he wasn't to make it by his land, and he died at the age of 28, 4 days after leaving Watchfield Festival. There's quite a few conspiracy theories covering particularly Shibboleth, and a little bit in the Travelling Days book here, whether he was bumped off by secret services, no one can definitely say. There were lots of strange circumstances at the house, doors that wouldn't have been left open because it was a doctor's surgery that were left open, all sorts of things that didn't make sense, no suicide note, no packaging from drugs or anything. But Wally was dead. This picture showing how bad his appearance had become, how different from the young man I showed you at the beginning of the talk. That was from his obituary in International Times. As a mark of honour, I mean, you can just about see the stones very close to all these tents here. The Stonehenge Festival moved back into the Stones field, in fact closer than Fort Wally had been, because it was now 3 times the size. Chris Waite was there with the teepee posse. There they are again with the teepees, right up against, you can't quite see that, but honestly they were right up against the stone. And they had Wally, and he was in this box. A box that was made by Penny. It was made similar to old art boxes he made, and after the cremation of his body he collected most of the ashes, not all of the ashes, some were left with family, and he brought them down to Stonehenge. He travelled down with a band called Sarah's Confusion, fully intending to play, but it was all a bit emotional for him, and Sid and various other characters started trying to take over, people who hadn't got on brilliantly well with Wally at the time. And here was Sid now marking out himself as quite a character on the Stonehenge scene, being, you know, officiating over Wally's ceremony when, you know, probably there were people far better qualified for him. But Sid over the next few years will become a strong voice for the travellers people. I mean, he travelled to Stonehenge over the next years after Wally's ashes were spread, and he continued to love the place, and he took over where Wally had been and became one of the driving forces. But Stonehenge became a bit more political again. There were moves against various places like Boscombe Down, which is an airfield nearby, Porton Down, which is a massive animal testing facility down in Salisbury. And there were a lot of people now, I mean, so it was quite a threat when these people started talking about doing direct actions and, you know, climbing into the stones. I mean, luckily the festival was quite mellow, the security guards were still quite mellow, and at one point the stage broke down and the police used their headlights to light up the stage. So not all was bad in the land of the henge. You know, I mean, you can see it from here, this is alongside Fargo now in '77, and the festival's grown massively. And people are still mellow and chilling out, and there's all sorts of drugs going around the site. This is Hawkwind when they came with their Atom Henge site. And this is strange, it's Glastonbury in '77, the festival that got Glastonbury as we know it and whatever we think of it, going again. A small travellers gathering out on the hill with a very low police presence again. Back in the days when policemen smiled and didn't have all that plastic stuff over their face. Now in 1984 I got this book which changed my life. This was written mainly by Penny, with a few contributions from others, and was later condensed into The Last of the Hippies, but it told of his anger and his absolute disgust at the system for killing his friend. Now that anger was to surface again later on in the Stonehenge festivals. We go on now to Stonehenge '84, and by this time Stonehenge City has arrived. You know, we're talking 30,000 people staying most part of a month. There, food, everything you could want to buy, and I mean pretty much everything. And what you expected to find you brought. I mean, that was the whole ethos that kept the festivals going. So if you wanted bands, you brought bands. If you wanted food, you brought food, and you were prepared to feed everyone. And it really was anarchy living out in the fields. You know, there were businessmen coming in from the local businesses, and the atmosphere at the Stones was still good. I mean, this is a naming ceremony that was going on in 1984. Sid Rawle again, overlooking the services, etc. There's a great many characters. I mean, there's Eddie Dorton around here, there's Bev Richardson, there's John Pendragon, another famous voice for the Free Festival movement. And then this lot happened. This lot. And I tell you, these people, they changed the travelling community. That woman was delighted to do anything she could to make life difficult for people like the travelling people. And she formed this Quango operation, English Heritage, formed mainly because National Trust wouldn't be hard on hippies. It was part of their statement that they should get people into the landscape, that people should be able to enjoy it. Well, Maggie didn't want people to enjoy it anymore, and English heritage helped facilitate this. The second most horrible day in travelling history, the Battle of the Beanfield, when the Rainbow Tribes trying to get to Stonehenge on the 1st of June were stopped near, I think it's 12 miles from Stonehenge. The vehicles were stopped in the road, all the front vehicles had their windows smashed, their occupants were arrested straight away. Overall, people say the estimates are between 480 and 540 arrests, and this is partly because there was so much confusion. Police weren't filling in records properly, many of them had no serial numbers on their shoulders, many MOD on the land. Another thing, I mean, once they'd stopped a vehicle, they would then start driving round the vehicle, and some of the buses were actually deliberately cutting up other vehicles, and then the vehicles were getting swarmed by the police. And it turns out that those police were then driving at the police to make it look bad for the cameras, so it looked like trucks were driving at the police, but it was other officers driving those vans at the time. There were many, like I say, many arrests, many people brutally treated. This fella here, Nick Davis of the Guardian, wrote some beautiful pieces about the Beanfield. I mean, it was an experience that changed his life. Yeah, changed a lot of people's lives. I've talked to coppers who were on that field who were disgusted about what they did that day. I've talked to bus drivers who picked them up off that field and heard them going, "Oh, you should have seen the one I got it right in the face." Would you get that right in the face? Some of these people suffered traumatic stress for years to come. Some of these people couldn't go into large crowds, couldn't go to festivals. And this is what was intended, to decommission the convoy. This is Phil Beer's fire engine, sadly burnt out. Now the Earl of Cardigan took in the refugees from the Beanfield because he'd been riding alongside the convoy when it had been stopped and was horrified to see what was being done to the people. This paper got it right. There was an agenda, and the agenda was to stop us gathering at the stones. Oh, you can't see it, but it's got a nice little anarchy sign, and we want our stones back written across the bottom here. It's a shame we can't see that because it's one of my favourite pictures I've found so far. In fact, I might even have it tattooed on my shoulder. Another favourite. These Romans are crazy, you know. And this is how they seemed. You know, they were Romans stopping us from going to our temple. They were standing with their big shields in the way that a Roman legion would have stood. In '86 we tried to get to Stonehenge again, but people ended up down at Stony Cross in the New Forest after being chased across Dorset and blocked on every exit, blocked everywhere they tried to go, and there was no talking to them. They came in, they did vehicle bust, Operation Daybreak, and vehicles were just gone through. If you couldn't carry your possessions, you had to leave them there. And don't try and argue with them, you're going to end up arrested. Now luckily, one of the secular order had been up to the site the night before and said that he'd been at dinner with a fairly well-to-do gentleman who told them that the Social Security were planning to take their children. So the children, at least 30 of them, were off the site that morning. The people who remained on the site were faced with a choice. You couldn't go to Stonehenge, the road was closed, the stones on the hill, the riot police were in place, ready and waiting for another battle should there be one. And people carried on. This is the first year we had the exclusion zone. 5 miles around the stones where if you look like me, you couldn't go there. You just couldn't go there for days and days before solstice and days after. There were many complaints from local public who said they were being obstructed in their lawful duties. It seemed like the writing was on the wall for Stonehenge. But the Peace Convoy wouldn't lie down. It wouldn't, it wouldn't just be trashed. They built their own Stonehenge out of cars at Glastonbury. I love the mutilated waste. If I could have one in my garden, I would, and maybe I'll have to make one because maybe that's what I was meant to learn: is that you make your own. Turning the trash that people were leaving behind into working art. I mean, I learned so much when I was hanging around with the Mutoids. Mutonia was beautiful. And also it offered this, the peace just to park up like you would at a decent festival. Now this fella here, George Fairstoff, a local round these ways, he was campaigning strongly and he got people back into the Stones in '87 and a solstice was celebrated. I mean, there were a few arguments, a few things stirred up, but luckily we had people like Hillary and Dice George And the children of Albion danced in the shadow of the stones again, as Wally predicted. Sid, yet again, proceeding over ceremonies. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people liked what he did. I mean, he had a bit of trouble later on in his life, but that's not for this talk, that's a whole different talk. Now, 88, you had a lot going on. English Heritage had a sudden change. They started seeing it more as a place you could make money out of, and they started tidying up again. They tried negotiating. We wanted total freedom. They wouldn't let us have freedom. A row of riot police keeping people away from the stones. People allowed in the road, right up by the Hillstone, but not allowed into the stones that they loved. They knew what was going to happen. They had the numbers, and it kicked off, and it was kicking off all night. Many injuries, many arrests. People finally taking possession of the Hillstone. The Druids carried on having their ceremony, but it brought new energy back into the stone struggle. People started turning back up again. I wish you could see this better, and yet again, I mean, the police just keeping people away. Now, unfortunately, at this time, another incident happened, Glastonbury 1990. Many people feeling on the outside of society, using way too many drugs, the wrong drugs, should I say, because I love drugs. Drinking far too much beer, and it kicked off. There was a riot at Glastonbury. Many security things destroyed, and it's running away from me now. I better run on now anyway. Later on in 91, we end up with Spiral Tribe hanging around the stones, doing a party on Longstock, building their own pyramid and declaring that Stonehenge Free Festival was on, wherever it was, as long as it was near the stones it was on. Later on, they went on to organise another massive festival, probably the biggest festival we've ever had. I mean, people were driving in for days. BBC TV were telling you how to get there. The radio was telling you about every 3/4 of an hour. Oh, go to Castle Morton, there's a load of dirty hippies, and they're going to have a big party, and it looks like it's going to last for about 2 weeks. Please don't go there. So they were advertising it on the radio, on the telly. You know, they wanted massive numbers. They wanted to then pull people in front and increase the power. They were cooking up the Criminal Justice Act, and that came. And we fought, and free parties reclaimed the streets, all sorts of people were out there. And back at the Stones, our next victory wouldn't be until 1999. People being forced still to stand on the outside while people were on the inside were doing ceremonies. Well, no, that's enough. People climbed in, broke down the fences, climbed onto the stones and took occupation of the stones, as they always figured their right was. The police, judging from the numbers, couldn't deal with it. And so a standoff was achieved, and English Heritage lost a lot of money that day, which always warms me to the cockles of my heart. Anyway, they eventually retook the place, and the following year we end up with Solstice Experience. English Heritage now deciding that they can't afford the 3 million a year it's costing to keep people away, and they let people back into the stones. But there are so many rules. There's strip searches, there's sniffer dogs, there's people being turned away for eye gel because it's a glass container. You might go around bottling someone. The police were swarming all over the place. She was pulled out within minutes. No naked lights. You couldn't even light a tea light in there. You couldn't. Someone was thrown out for sage smudges, and the place got ridiculous. People, like old Wallies, like Tim Abbott there and Helen Hatt, carried on being the voice of the travellers, trying on, keep going to English Heritage meeting, pushing for as much as we possibly gained out of the Solstice Experience for the memory of Wally. And this is what I end up doing myself now. I'm collecting a massive archive, collecting together all I can, working quite strongly with Crass. That was a Crass crop circle that appeared in 2010 at the Stones, at the same time as this sort of thing was happening to people. But people were still coming together for beautiful gatherings. And I do sort of like the solstices. I don't like the way they run, but I do like the people I meet there. I do like the young people who come for the first time and are blown away by something. Hopefully not blown away by the police, who've been rather heavy over the years. This is the Ancestor Monument, not so clear in that picture. They're slowly letting more and more onto the field. We managed to get an acoustic stage onto the field this year. Would have had Penny Rambo playing with a cello, but you can't amplify a cello because I'm afraid that's a festival. So now English Heritage, you can see their little logo down here, picture of Stonehenge, they have the monopoly. And the question I ask still is whose heritage? I mean, it's not English. I mean, the word English comes from Anglo. I mean, Stonehenge goes way back beyond Anglo. times. So whose heritage? I mean, it's mine and yours, it's all of ours, it's everybody's, it's the nation's, it was given to the nation. And in loving memory of Wally Hope, I will keep campaigning to try and get our stones freed up. I'm trying to get arrested at the moment, which is, you know, I've tried not to for quite a while, and now I'm trying to again, because it's an act that keeps us off that field. I've screamed in the face of chief constables, and they've asked them rather politely to arrest me, but they won't, because they know if they take me to court, then we will start ripping their act apart, and people will be able to walk across one of the most beautiful areas, I am slightly biased, of our, you know, of our country. I mean, this to me is the heart of Albion. This is where everything, I believe, emanates from, the energy that keeps us, you know, thriving, you know. And hopefully one day we'll see a festival. I mean, I'm not holding my breath because I'd be a very dead man now, like our dear Wally. So, you know, for Wally, I carry on doing this. I talk to you, and I'd welcome, if you wish, in the last half hour to discuss any, or, you know, have any questions or anything that you'd like me to elaborate on. Oh, look, he's going off again. Can we kill the slides now? Thank you, brother. He's that old Marston again. He's going all backwards to himself. I mean, the fact is, I mean, just stepping on beyond my Wally talk, is that people are still campaigning. There's groups out there on Facebook, many of them asking for quite lawful things, you know, where they can have better access. Well, if we're allowed 4 days, well, then let's ask for 8. It's always been the, you know, and we're also, I mean, slightly, you know, the best we can do is a bit of economic damage. A few of us, a couple of, winter of 2012, got English Heritage to spend £37,000 they didn't really need to spend. And small victories like that amount to nothing when, that can go off now, brother. You know, they amount to nothing when they plan to make 11 million out of the stones this year. If you go to the visitor centre now, you're driven down in this Land Rover, which crawls at about 30 miles an hour. The ticket prices went up overnight. From £7.50, they went up to £15. The visitor centre's moved away. No vehicles are allowed down near the stones, apart from the few of us who venture out onto the drove, where we're still contesting our land rights. We beat an inquiry a couple of years back, when English Heritage first wanted to shut off the drove to vehicular access. And we will continue fighting, because I mean that's the easiest place for us to gather for access to the stone. And I mean, I know a community now that are living there on and off throughout the year. You can almost any day pop up onto that drove. And if you get smiling at the right person, you'll get a cup of tea, you'll get a friendly welcome. If it's at night and a fire's burning, sit down and tell a story, because they've got plenty of stories to tell you. You know, the no signal, I mean that's what we get from the other side. It's, it really is banging your head against a brick wall. Like I said, I mean, we wanted to amplify a cello this year. Penny was going to do a special poem which remembered the 40 years since his friend first started a festival at Stonehenge. And they couldn't even amplify a cello. Because, I mean, the idea behind it, it's not a repetitive beat. We're trying to fight it on the law. You know, it's not a repetitive beat on the cello, and if that's the only instrument, it doesn't break the Criminal Justice Act. But unfortunately, like I say, we're fighting a massive hierarchy. They've got the power, they've got the land, they've got all the landowners tied in. You know, festivals not going to happen, but gatherings can be whatever we make them. They can, you know, so many people I hear are now sort of saying, yeah, I don't go to Solstice anymore because it's horrible, you know, because I got my bum looked up last year by some security goons, you know, and policemen pulling me into a room, strip searching me, trying to get into Wally's box, and, you know, I mean, it's just intimidation. You sniff a dog pulled off, it's not what you want. You wouldn't expect that on your way into a mosque or a cathedral. It's a religious right, and, you know, the more of us that go there and stand up for our rights, and I'm not just saying at Solstice, I mean any day that you want to go there, go there. If you're passing, go there. And jump over their fence and just walk in. You don't have to get into no confrontation. They'll just come over and say, would you mind leaving now? This is it, the tourists are there. If the tourists aren't there, then well, it's a different game. I went in there in January just before I went off for a bit of a break in Spain. My last chance to see the Stones for a good 3 months. I'd recently been handfasted to my lovely long-suffering Wally over there, and I wanted to see the Stones. I mean, and we managed to get like 10 minutes inside the Stones, and then all of a sudden there's a great big torch on us, and we're having fuck off shout at us. So we, being like not too much of an anarchist mood, and it being about 2 o'clock in the morning, thought, okay, then we'll fuck off, because that big man over there says we should. But that big man over there suddenly stopped being over there and was right in my face. And I'm telling him clearly that we're moving away from him, and that no way should a CIA, I get the two mixed up, SIA security man be as rough as he was starting to get with me, but he ignored me. I ended up being like knocked in the shoulder continuously with an end of a big torch like that. I mean, I was sore for like weeks afterwards, you know. And when I put in a complaint, the first thing they said to me in my email was, Dean, you do have to realise that you are actually trespassing and therefore breaking the law, and therefore, security guards can do this? No, I don't think so, you know. And I'm going to be going back into the Stones every time I can. I urge any of you to. And come along to our gatherings. We have having gatherings at spring equinox, the autumn equinox, the winter solstice, which are really beautiful and mellow. There's a, you know, the Druids have their little thing go on, but there's a lot of people that ain't Druids that are there for their own reasons, whether they be pagan, whether they just be stone lovers. I've met plenty of people who don't have any religion, but just feel drawn to that place. And the more of us that challenge their rights to turf us off, to tell us thou shalt not, then thou shalt wilt. You know, we will have our way again. You know, like I say, I mean, I might have to be mellow on the festival. There's a chance that we might have a bit of land come up next year, but it's all, you know, once they find out, they'll start putting their blockers on us. If anyone does end up in the Wiltshire area next year, then Sevenac could be a good place to head for, but don't tell anyone. So yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed my talk, and yeah, like, if anyone wants a question or anything, like.
Yeah, you said that they gave him a 2,000 milligram pill when he was in the psychiatric home.
Yeah.
What was that substance?
He was getting fed out on Weldorm, Largactil, haloperidol, various drugs like that that are mood inhibitors, you know, basically personality crushers. Largactil is referred to as the medical cosh, you know, and I ended up in a mental hospital for a year. You know, don't look at me any differently because I'm a nice person, really. I ended up in a mental hospital, and having been treated with a fraction of the drugs he was treated with, I was a zombie for my first 6 months in there. You know, I didn't know what I was doing half the time, you know, and that was what they wanted. They wanted me totally dead in my head, and that's where I ended up for a while. Luckily, you know, something got me out, you know, maybe Wally got me out, so I'm here. But yeah, all the details of the drugs can be found in Shibboleth, or I'm running a blog site now, Wally Hope's blogspot.co.uk, but the easiest way to find me is through Facebook. I mean, any questions. What I'm doing is I'm building an archive. I mean, I've got loads of people donating stuff at the moment. I've just been given the whole Dial House archive, which is, you know, sometimes I'm close to tears reading personal messages from Wally, messages between Wally's friends, people like Heathcote Williams, the shock, you know, the shock that something so terrible could happen to such a nice person is still living on. Wally's got a book that he had written. I mean, the last little bit of it's a bit sketchy. He didn't know he was going to die, so he didn't hurry up, you know. But the thoughts of Chairman Wally hopefully will be coming out over the next year. I mean, hopefully by the 40th anniversary of his death next September. Possibly an existential book, you know, because I mean, the Crass people, are, you know, Penny and G, still really involved with the story, although it seems like I'm getting more and more involved with the story, and that seems to be where they're liking it now. You know, for Penny, it was a stage in his life, a stage that did him a lot of damage psychically, and emotionally, and spiritually, and it's taken him a long time to rebuild himself. But now we can look up and you can say, thanks Wally, you gave me the anger that became Crass, you gave the anarcho-punk that energy to try and change things in the way you've tried to change things with love, but been beaten for it. So, you know, maybe that's where the whole anarcho-punk came from. We weren't going to be beaten down and drugged down anymore. But, you know, we're the remnants of a strong anarcho-punk movement, you know. I'm glad to hear you're all, you know, at Bookfair, because I think anarchists that can read are the best sort, because they learn so much, and can obviously read instructions, like put that with that, and it makes one of them, if you know what I mean. Not saying anything, but that visitor centre is ugly. Yeah, basically, any more questions? Sorry, I've waffled a bit.
There was a newspaper clip saying that John Snag was Wally's
Yeah,
father.
John Snag was a BBC presenter and was quite a good friends with Wally's natural father. Strangely, it seemed strange at the time, should I say, Wally's dad had made provisions that if he died while doing work abroad, what exactly should be done with his son, what should be done with his property, etc. He wasn't in a dangerous job, he was in the paints department. But it turns out, I mean, shouldn't go much further beyond these walls, maybe not until I got a little bit more proof, but he was working for British intelligence. John Snake also worked for British intelligence, and you know, I mean, the Russell family goes back to Elizabethan times. You know, they've been involved with the intrigues of this country for many centuries. So,
What was John Snag's relationship?
yeah, I mean, he was guardian. I mean, he like I say, he was friends with Wally's dad. When Wally's dad died, he took the job on quite well. The mother was in a mess for quite a while. Obviously, you know, suddenly losing her husband. She was a Danish woman, you know, at home in England. And, you know, didn't have her old network of friends. She lost it for a little bit. Took up with a ruffian, apparently, which is probably what they call most of us as well. And it ended up being written out of the will. And John Snake carried on being the executive of the will. Carried on giving Wally his spending money, about £12 a week in '75. Apparently, that's quite good. And before that, it was money with D's and squiggles. So yeah, I mean, he was a well-to-do fella. So John Snake was keeping that going for him. And like I say, I mean, when he got to 30, he'd have got 39,000. So you know, he was a threat to them. You know, he was a landed gentry in a couple of years, and they didn't let him get there. Died 28, a victim of ignorance. You know, so.
Where's everybody going to park this year for Stonehenge Festival? Because the visitor centre's in the old field where you used to park.
Yeah, they're limiting. I think there's another 2,000 spaces missing out of the car parking. They're saying that they're going to lay on a lot better public transport, but I haven't seen their public transport over previous years. Best bet is just share, you know, car share as much as possible. And it's the eco thing to do, brothers and sisters. But yeah, I mean, you know, car share as much as you can. But I mean, people will be gathering around the area, and yeah.
Because they're building on the field, aren't they? I think they're going to build more
They're
stuff on that
building
field.
all over the place at the moment, yeah. I don't know what their final vision is, but I don't like it.
You used to get the bus down there from Marlborough. You used to get the bus to Marlborough
Yeah.
and walk over.
Yeah, it's lovely. I mean, this is one of the things that Wally was encouraging, was for people to go out and experience the land. You know, squatters out of London go out and experience the land, because living a month at Stonehenge would change you. Living there for 6 months would really change you. You know, I mean, I lived there for quite a while. I love the place, you know, and some of the experiences I've had out there. You know, it's my safe place. It's the only place I do acid. None of you are CID, are you? Oh, cool. I thought you were. You look like you'd had a wash.
I think it's interesting that a lot of this stuff happened in just after 1984, because 1984 is obviously seen through George Orwell as the year when it would all go, you know, have a totalitarian state. Interestingly, 1984, I always think is a sort of a high point of the counterculture. It's the last Stonehenge, but also looking at, I mean, you had the word agenda up there. The fact that the miners' strike is going to be commemorated this year as well. Very much the turning point there. The Green Common women had a hard time after that point. So it was a very, very much a turning point in that feels like a kind of pivot in my life anyway, being my kind of age.
I think both sides were changing at that moment.
Yeah.
Thatcher was paramilitarising the police,
Definitely, yeah.
and we were getting more and more pissed off, and there was going to be more fight back. So I think, yeah, I mean, I'd regard it as a high point. You know, I mean, that's when I'm starting to run around on my own. And
Yeah.
sort of, you know, not doing things with my mum and dad anymore.
Yeah.
I can go and throw bricks at the people I want to go and throw bricks at. That happens to be what, you know, I haven't thrown any bricks for a little while. I'm
I'd
quite
be
good now.
interested, just
But
as
words are like bricks.
is after that. I'm just wondering do you think there'll be any other information that will come out about Wally Hope in the future, or any kind of
I've
buried government
I
papers
managed
that
to
might...
track down his medical records, and I'm glad to tell you that I'll tell you all about him in 2075. Do the maths, I probably won't, so hopefully maybe some
We'll get
young
Hydra
ones
to get that in
amongst
the
you,
calendar
yeah?
now.
2075, okay, you can find out what I was on about. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's official secreted for 100 years. It's medical records. Yeah, we won't know the truth. But the Beanfield orders may or may not come out at the beginning of next year. You know, it being the 30th anniversary of the Beanfield next June 1st. So next June the 1st, there'd probably be a fairly nice little gathering at the Beanfield. But I mean, there'll be plenty of it on Facebook, and you know, we're going to try and go sort of find a bit of land that we can be on. So, you know, just for a Beanfield remembrance, try and get as many people who are on the Beanfield or affected by Beanfield, because you forget it affected so many people. I've had letters from the children of people who were on the Beanfield who've got slight memories of it all happening, but then seeing their parents change, you know, so the culture was beaten. Okay,
do you have a question, Matt?
I think it's alright.
No, you're going to let that go, okay, so no more questions. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes to go for a cup of tea.